Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with another extra credits video. This time we return Rome, the Punic Wars. The second Punic War begins, extra history number 2. Now, I'm going to expand a little bit on why I still think the 1 million figure is still slightly exaggerated. Now, there are some scholars that say with ancient sources really divide in half, and that is possibly the more accurate number. However, this was an exceptionally brutal war. However, the reason why I mainly think the 1 million total is possibly a little exaggerated is that, well, in the Battle of Cannae, the losses for the Romans were so great that they had to change their conscription laws and lower the age requirements. And I've heard varying, I think I heard one, Historia Civilis, we watched the Battle of Cannae, I believe he said 17% of Rome's adult male population, serviceable population, was killed, and that was gone after that battle. So, with that, that kind of leads me to believe, well, that was, what, like 80,000 Romans in that battle gone? And that's 17%? That leads me to believe that 1 million is slightly out of reach. Even over the course of 20 years. Okay, even over the course of 20 years of all-out war, right? Because Hannibal, I just don't see 1 million being possible this early on in Roman history over the course of 20 years, specifically fighting. I would believe 500,000. I would agree with hands down. I think possibly more believable would probably maybe be in the range of 700 to 800,000. I think that's where I'm gonna sit. As someone that really has, whose specialty is in post-Rome, late 800s England. So that's my specialty. So, you know, take my opinion, obviously, with a grain of salt. Let's go ahead, dive right in.
Welcome back. Let's have some more Roman history, shall we?
Yeah!
When we left off last time, Hamilcar's son Hannibal controlled a powerful army expanding the Carthaginian territory in the Iberian Peninsula. Today, we begin the Second Punic War itself.
Yeah.
Hannibal's campaign in Iberia was slowly taking his army ever northward. Eventually, his territory expanded dangerously near to the Ebro River, which the previous Carthaginian ruler in Spain
Hasdrubal, Hamilcar's son-in-law, continued to expand Carthaginian holdings in Iberia. It was Hasdrubal who founded New Carthage on the Mediterranean coast. Today is Cartagena. Hasdrubal appears to have focused on diplomatic rather than military means of expansion. For example, he arranged a local princess bride for young Hannibal. When Hasdrubal was killed by a disaffected Iberian mercenary in 221, it was Hannibal's turn to succeed. Almost immediately, he put everything back on a military footing. Hannibal was 25/26 when he succeeded Hasdrubal.
Spain had established as the border where Carthaginian influence ended and Roman influence began. Obviously, the Romans were not fans of this development, but here's where it gets murky.
Rome is greedy.
To this day, historians can't agree on which river the Ebro River referred to in the treaty actually is, which makes interpreting what happens next simply a matter of deciding who you believe. You see, there was a Greek colony in northern Spain called Saguntum. It was a prosperous trading city, and they had recently signed a treaty with Rome. The Romans claimed that, according to the Ebro River Treaty, this city was sacrosanct and under their protection. But Hannibal claimed it was on the wrong side of the river, and therefore part of his territory. The year is 219 BC. Hannibal is 26 years old, and he remembers the oath.
Hannibal's oath. Early versions of the story say that Hamilcar made a 9-year-old son Hannibal swear he would never be a friend of Rome before he would agree to take Hannibal with him to Iberia. Later legend said that he had to swear to Apollo that he would always be the enemy of Rome. Hamilcar appears to have taken the whole clan to Iberia, probably in 237 BC. Shortly after arrival, he started to expand outward from existing colonies using a combination of diplomacy and force. Hamilcar took a local wife, apparently to smooth an alliance. Hamilcar died while crossing a river under fire and was succeeded by his son-in-law, Hasdrubal the Fair, in 229 BC. Hannibal was 17 and too young to succeed his father.
His father made him take. Never be a friend to Rome. So he attacks,
Rome,
laying siege
stinky.
to the city, rebuking the Roman embassies that come to him for all the wrongs Rome has done Carthage. For 8 months,
So essentially, he starts the Punic War without the approval of the Carthaginian government. That's what it seems like.
Saguntines hold out, all the while pleading to Rome for help, begging their ally to come save them from what, without aid, is their certain doom. But Rome sent no troops. They had recently become embroiled in a war in Illyria, the Balkan region north of Greece, so never sent the aid the Saguntines were counting on, figuring that Saguntum could hold out on its own until their own Balkan war was done. but Hannibal's forces were too much for them. At long last, with the Saguntum population starving and the defenders falling back from outer wall to inner wall to the citadel of the city itself, Hannibal emerged victorious, and his army pillaged the city, selling into slavery everybody they didn't kill. Now, this is the point where Rome
This is how
might have
wars were fought back then. If you were in a war and your side lost, people that weren't killed, they would be turned into
been
slaves.
able to prevent the Second Punic War. Might have nipped it in the bud, but by not acting on their treaty and not rescuing their ally, they brought 20
Seriously,
years
I'm
of
busy,
unimaginable
please.
war upon the Mediterranean. When Saguntum fell, Rome sent an emissary to Carthage to offer them a choice: surrender Hannibal to Rome or face war. The emissary stood before the Carthaginian Senate, surrounded by all the great men of Carthage, and said to them, "I hold before you both peace and war." The leader of the Senate spat back, "Choose what you will." The envoy replied, "I choose war." And the entire chamber exploded with shouts of, "We accept it!" And now it's on. Hannibal's
Ooh.
off the leash. The Second Punic War has begun. The Romans begin to prepare for war. They send an army down to Sicily with one of their consuls to get ready for an invasion of Carthage in North Africa, and they send their other consul off with an army to invade Iberia and capture Carthaginian holdings there, leaving a small force of recruits to make sure that the Gauls in northern Italy don't take this as an opportunity to cause mischief while the bulk of the military is away. And now is probably a good time to take a moment to talk a little bit about Roman politics, because it's going to become very important in a second. You see, in Rome, each year they would elect 2 consuls to be the heads of state. These guys would function more or less like the US president, except that they each had veto power over the other, and unlike the president, who is
Balances of power.
the supreme commander of the US military but doesn't actually fight on the ground, these guys would also be the ones to lead the Roman armies into battle. They were very much the generals on the ground, choosing the strategies and directing the battles. Of course, they weren't amateurs in this. You had
No,
to
they
have
weren't.
10 years of military service to even be eligible for the lowest political office in Rome. Nonetheless, we're going to see how politics affect this war pretty soon. For now, back to Hannibal. Hannibal is a clever guy. He
Not me.
realizes that trying to defend North Africa is a losing proposition, and he knows that fighting on his own turf in Iberia will only result in a slow defeat. So he plans to do the unthinkable and invade Italy by crossing the Alps. Now, of
Absolute
course,
mad
that's
lad.
the one thing the Romans didn't plan for. The army they left in northern Italy is nothing but raw recruits and the dregs of their former forces. All of their real soldiers are either heading south to prepare for an African invasion, or making the trek across what is now France to invade Spain. And that's where the first skirmish of the war happens. That Spain invasion force runs into Hannibal as he's making his way to the Alps, and their scouts clash.
Oh.
A few hundred cavalry from each side run into each other unexpectedly and come to blows. The Roman scouts manage to push back the Carthaginians. It's nothing decisive. The important thing is that they live to report this news back to their commander, Publius Cornelius Scipio. You're gonna want to remember that name,
Yep, the only man who really stood a chance against Hannibal.
Scipio. You know how on the Carthaginian side you have the sons of the great general Hamilcar from the last war, fighting together on a blood oath they swore to their father to avenge the shame Carthage suffered at the hands of the Romans? Well, this guy is their Roman equivalent. This Scipio we just met will eventually die on the field, slain by Hannibal's armies, but his son will later crush Hannibal and turn the tide of the war, and his great-grandson will go on to sack Carthage and wipe them out forever, 70 years after the story we're telling. See, that's part of what makes the Second Punic War so epic. Blood oaths and vengeance, rivalry from 2 great houses, a war passed down from...
It's really interesting, like, how the fuck that happens, like, the timing, just, history's so
father
cool.
to son, 2 bloodlines vying for the fate of the world. It's awesome. And this battle is their first meeting where the whole rivalry begins. Scipio, now aware
See
of
what you did
Hannibal's
there,
invasion
sneaky
force,
sneaky.
tries to give chase, but Hannibal manages to slip away. Without the resources or the logistics in place to do otherwise, Scipio makes the fateful decision to have his army press on toward Spain as planned, while he himself speeds back with all haste to rally the forces in northern Italy. Hannibal, meanwhile, continues his march across France. The Romans expected him to be slowed down by hostile tribes, just like they always were when they tried to cross Gaul, but Hannibal has planned ahead, and he already offered the tribes generous gifts and the promise that his fury has only
Wine
one
always
target,
helps, I guess.
Rome. And the plan works, mostly.
Yeah, you pretty
He
much
does
tell
the-
them, hey, we're gonna go fight Rome and kick their ass. The Gauls are gonna agree. The Gauls are gonna be more than happy to let you go through their land if it means beating up
get
Rome.
halted by the local forces once. At the Rhone River, a band of Gauls with Roman allegiances assemble an army on the far side, intending to prevent his crossing. However, unbeknownst to them, Hannibal has already sent one of his officers, Hanno, known as Hanno son of Bomilcar, to differentiate him from Hannibal's own son, also named Hanno, just to be perfectly confusing. Anyway, Hannibal already sent Hanno with some handpicked troops to cross the river upstream. So Hannibal makes to cross, the Gauls assemble on the opposite bank to stop him, and then, just as planned, Hanno comes bursting out of hiding and assaults their forces from the rear, scattering the Gaul force and leaving the way open for Hannibal's army to continue their march. And haste was essential for Hannibal,
Run,
as it was
Shadowfax.
already September, and he had to get his army across the Alps before it got any colder. Even at this pace, the conditions they faced in the Alps were brutal. There is a reason why this march is one of the most famous events in military history, and
Yep.
why its audacity caught the Romans entirely by surprise. And that's because everyone thought it was impossible. There was no way you
It
could march
should
an
be
army through the
impossible.
treacherous peaks of the Alps in the beginning of winter. It simply could not be done. And yet, Hannibal went and did it. He dismissed the less
But he had a lot of casualties doing it.
reliable members of his army at the foot of the Alps and began his ascent. The weather was brutal. Men froze to death, mules fell from the frozen cliffs still laden with the army's food and supplies, hill tribes attacked them and rolled boulders onto the narrow paths, ice and snow beset them the whole way, and at times men had to crawl to make it along the tiny mountain track. But they did it. In the end, they made it to Italy. But the cost? By some accounts, Hannibal had 98,000 men when he started the climb, and only 26,000 when he set
I didn't hear those numbers before. Oh,
foot into
fuck,
Italy
that's
on the
way
other
more than I
side.
thought.
Upon reaching Italy, Hannibal gives his troops time to rest from the arduous crossing, and tries to recruit the local Gauls to his cause, as they have no love for the Romans either. Meanwhile, Scipio is racing toward them with whatever handful of troops he can assemble, knowing full well what Hannibal intends. They meet, and come to blows in a whirlwind cavalry engagement by the Tincino. The larger, better-trained Carthaginian cavalry dances circles around the Roman infantry and the few cavalry Scipio could muster. The engagement is small but a decisive defeat for the Romans, a defeat in which Scipio is gravely wounded, and would have lost his life if it weren't for a heroic rescue by his then 18-year-old son fighting by his side, a man we will later know as Scipio Africanus.
Yep.
So Scipio withdraws to recover and regroup. This skirmish may not have been a major victory for the Carthaginians, but it's an enormous boost to their morale after such a grueling journey, and the local Gauls, upon hearing of the battle, start to think Hannibal's
But-
army might have a chance, and they begin defecting en masse. Now Rome is worried. The other consul, Sempronius
Smashed.
Longus, is recalled from Sicily,
What an amazing name.
and he and his legions start
Don't you love
marching
Roman
north to
names?
join Scipio's battered command. When he arrives, Sempronius immediately starts pressing for an attack, but Scipio, having already seen Hannibal's army in action, cautions against it. Sempronius is eager, though, hot-headed and looking to brawl. He believes Scipio's caution is born of his wounds, and thinks him cowardly to not attempt to drive this invader from Roman soil. Scipio advises they use winter for training. As you'll remember, the men left in northern Italy were raw recruits, or the remnants of a previously defeated army. But here's where the Roman politics comes in. The next year's elections are drawing near, and Sempronius wants a glorious victory for his faction and his family before this
Yep.
term's done. He is not going to be denied this opportunity. Now, while each Roman consul is actually the supreme commander of his army, when two consuls are together, they alternate days for who is in charge of the whole thing. Hannibal knows this, and he also knows about Sempronius' temperament, which he uses to bait a trap. Early one
Oh, no.
morning, after sending his brother Mago with 2,000 hand-picked men to hide behind a small hill, Hannibal sends out a detachment of cavalry to harass the Roman army, who are camped just across the river Trebia. It's the winter solstice, one of the coldest days of the year. Sleet is pouring down, and the sun's just barely beginning to rise when this detachment is spotted. Sempronius orders the chase, and his men leap out of bed, throwing on their armor, and prepare to engage. The Carthaginian cavalry retreats across the river, and Sempronius gives chase. He orders his men to wade across the water. The men
Oh,
drag
Sempronius.
themselves to the other side in full
you
armor,
idiot.
sometimes up to their necks in the freezing water. Once across, it's clear that Hannibal is willing to meet them in battle, so the troops are ordered to form up. Think about how long it would take to get 50,000 men organized and in formation with nothing but shouting and some flags. It takes hours. So here the men are, standing in the sleet, soaked from head to toe with frigid water, roused before dawn and launched into a chase without even time for a meal. It's probably been half a day since any of them have eaten. Meanwhile, Hannibal let his men sleep in and had them around big roaring fires eating a hearty meal before forming up. Now, to add to that, put yourself in the Romans' shoes for a moment. Imagine you're a provincial Roman farmer. The most you've seen of the world is maybe the length of Italy if you're really well traveled. Now,
Yep.
imagine that through the sleet and the mist, you see a great gray lumbering bulk begin
Oh,
to
yeah,
emerge.
the elephants.
Imagine you see this creature 2.5
Star
times as
Wars.
tall as you, at least a chariot length long, with glistening white tusks and a distended snout, its eerie trumpeting carrying across to you faintly on the wind. This is probably the closest that human beings ever got to legit fighting monsters, fighting something so alien and gargantuan that there was no frame of reference for them. The average Italian had probably never even heard of an elephant, much less seen one before. So imagine lining
I
up
would agree
against
with
that, and knowing that you'll have to fight such a thing with just your short spear and your sword. Now, despite all of those disadvantages, the Roman infantry fared pretty well at first, more than holding their own against the hodgepodge of Numidians, Celts, and Spaniards that faced them. But the exhausted Roman cavalry is driven off the field. The Numidian cavalry then wheels around and attacks the Roman flanks. At the same time, Mago's forces
Yep,
that have
that's
been
it.
so patiently laying in ambush spring onto the Roman rear and everything starts to collapse. Though Sempronius escapes with his life, the Romans' retreat leaves more than 25,000 dead. For the
Oof.
first time, the Romans see this is going to be no easy war. Join us next time for the continuation of the Second Punic War. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for making the video. And that was Rome, the Punic Wars. The Second Punic War has begun. Extra history number 2. I thought I had something else to add on there at the end, but I really don't. So my brain stuttered. That was by Extra Credits. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.